That's what's coming off the planer. And it's orange.
Next thing we're going to do is check and see if this board's flat. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to lay it on top of the table saw that's got a piece of melamine laying on it and see if it rocks. It looks like it might be okay. We'll be back in a minute. Oh. I think this is going to be a charcuterie board on part of it. If we were making a cutting board out of it, we would edge this by putting it on a known straight edge and running it across the table saw and make that exactly straight. But for what we're doing, I don't really need it to be straight. I don't even need the other side to be parallel, but it's just easier to take it to the table saw and do the other side. So we're going to go from this, we're going to cut this side off. And one of the reasons I'm doing that, because I got a pretty bad spot in the board there. It's probably where they used a cant hook when they were rolling the logs, or even when they had it on the sawmill turning the board over.
So off to the table saw. So when we plane our boards, right where the planer starts, it cuts a little extra groove into the board, and that's called snipe. And we've done all kinds of things with our planer to try to reduce the amount of snipe that we're getting. We've tried a sled, we've tried running longer boards through at the same time, and we just have not been able to eliminate the snipe altogether. And it's really hard to sand that out when you're sanding, because it's quite a bit of a difference in the wood. So what we do with the charcuterie boards is we take the snipe into account when we're deciding on the size, and we'll just cut that off. So we'll cut this board off somewhere along here. It'll eliminate the snipe. We don't have to deal with it in the sanding process. So now this is the actual final size and shape of our charcuterie board. The next step is At the router table, we'll take the board and we'll run it through the router and put a round over on all of the edges and on the inside of the hole there too, to make it nice and smooth. Next stop, router table.
You always do your end grains first in case it tries to chip out.
So these are our latest two charcuterie boards. This was a piece of walnut that we cut into a couple of boards and we've sanded. We started at 80 grit sandpaper. We went to 120, 180, 220, 320, something like that. So they're nice and smooth now, and Roy's applying the oil, which is absolutely my favorite part of the process, because that's when you really see the beauty of the wood pop out. The grains actually start to show, and it really is a really nice finishing touch. It helps to seal the wood, so there's a function to it other than just the aesthetics. But it does make the wood grain pop. All the cutting boards that we've done up to this point, I was the one that oiled them, and Roy told me I was not letting him have any of the fun. He was having to do all the work and wasn't getting to have any of the fun of oiling, so he's oiling these two.
I didn't say that I did all the work.
Well, you were only working and not having any fun. Maybe I should say it that way. But that's a gorgeous piece of walnut right there. It's got some beautiful grain. It's just spectacular. So we thought we would answer a few of the questions that you may have about the woodworking projects that we have been working on this winter. We have been making cutting boards and charcuterie boards and having a lot of fun working with wood and learning how to make cutting boards and charcuterie boards. So we're starting with hardwood that we're buying from one of the local lumber stores. It's been in business in the Raleigh area for a long time. But hardwood lumber is not finished, and so it's very rough, and so we're having to start out with the planer for each one of our projects. So the boards will run through the planer to get them flat and to start to get a smoother surface on that makes them more workable in our projects. From there, we'll decide on the design. When we started doing charcuterie boards, once we decided we'd do some with handles, we had to figure out a handle design. And so we drew a couple out and we cut them out and just picked them up and handled them and decided which handle we liked better. And so this is our handle template that we're using now. So Roy will cut the initial project out on the jigsaw if we're doing charcuterie boards especially. And he'll get the saw cut pretty close to the design or the trace out that we've done from the template, but not right to the line. And so we'll actually go from the cutting out with a jigsaw to the oscillating sander. We bought one of those this year, and you can use the little spindles with it, or it has a belt that you can use as well. And it goes around, the belt goes around, and it also goes up and down. And so that's been really good for starting the sanding process and for making the final shape of our project on the charcuterie boards. The belt part does really good on the long flat surfaces, but also helps to get the design here on these inside radiuses and even on the outside of the handle. And then we're using the spindles for the holes that are cut out on the inside of the handle to sand those. So once we finish all that, then the fun work starts, the actual finish sanding. And that's the most time consuming part of the project. We have had to use our belt sander on a couple of pieces that were really, really rough, even after going through the planer. And so we've had to break out the belt sander. But mostly the tool we're using is the orbital sander. And we've got a DeWalt battery-powered random orbital sander. We have started shopping at the local Klingspor store. We have learned that they're very well known in the woodworking community for their abrasives, and we've learned a lot about sanding and sanding discs from the guys who work over there. So we're starting out, some of our boards, like I said, were really pretty rough and had some chips in them from the planer, and those we had to start out with a 60 grit paper. It's very aggressive. Typically you would start one of these projects out using an 80 grit sandpaper, but we're progressing from that to 120, 120, 180, 220, and at that point we'll take a water bottle and spray water and just wet the boards, and that helps to raise the grain back up. And you want to address that now, because once you give your project away as a gift, or if you're selling it, you don't want somebody's cutting board to have the grains raise up the first time it gets wet. But this is what happens. We wet it down, raise the grain up. Once it dries, we'll go back with the 220 again, and then we're finishing off with a 320 grit sandpaper. Now, if you're doing a woodworking project that you're staining your wood, you would probably want to stop at the 220 so that your wood would actually accept the stain. If you get your board too smooth, like with a 320, you may have trouble getting the wood to actually absorb the stain. But we're not using any kind of stain. We're just using mineral oil, because we're using these as food products, serving boards and cutting boards. And the mineral oil is it's food safe. So we're finishing ours off with a 320 grit sandpaper that makes a really nice smooth surface on our boards, and we're really liking the way those turn out. So once we finish all the sanding, and like I said, that takes a long time. You have to be really patient with that. Then we'll apply mineral oil, and that helps to bring out the color in the wood. You see the grain and the texture in the wood, and it also helps to seal it up. After the mineral oil is absorbed into the wood, we have a butcher block conditioner that we'll put on that is a mineral oil and beeswax combination. And then our charcuterie boards, we're finishing off with a more of a paste wax. It's mostly beeswax with just a little bit of mineral oil to make it pliable so that you can apply. So that's how we're finishing those up. This is one of the charcuterie boards we've just finished up today. A piece of walnut that was just gorgeous. And we've got the oil on this one. And we're going to let this soak up overnight and see if we need to apply another coat tomorrow. And then we'll finish this one off. So that's how we're doing our woodworking projects this winter.